My name is Emily Carter, and from the outside, people think I live a flawless life. They see the glass tower where my office sits, 32 floors above the streets of Manhattan. They see me step out of a black car, in my silk blouse and heels that click like punctuation marks on marble floors. They see the confidence. What they don't see is the ache that still lingers, the sting of a childhood memory that never quite stopped burning. This morning, as sunlight spilled through my penthouse window, I ran my hand over the smooth wood of my desk. Beside my coffee mug sat a small figurine, one of the only toys I managed to keep from my childhood. A tiny plastic horse with a chipped ear. It's not worth more than $1, but to me, it's priceless. My phone buzzed. A notification. I picked it up, half expecting another client email. Instead, it was a forwarded message from an old neighbor. Emily, you won't believe this. Your parents are at the community center's charity sale selling boxes of vintage toys. Some of them look like the ones you used to have. For a moment, my chest tightened. My fingers gripped the phone so hard, I thought the screen might crack. I stared out at the skyline, the city glowing with opportunity, and I couldn't help but laugh. Soft, bitter, ironic. My parents once sold away my childhood toys without a second thought. Now, I own the company that makes them. When I think back, it always starts with the attic. That dusty little corner of our old house in Ohio, where sunlight slipped through cracked wooden panels and lit up shelves stacked with toys. For me, those toys weren't just things. They were worlds. Each doll had a personality, every stuffed animal had a secret, and my shelves were kingdoms waiting to be explored. My favorite was a stuffed rabbit named Milo, his fur worn thin, one ear flopping lower than the other. To anyone else, he was just an old toy. But to me, he was safety. He was the quiet friend who never judged, who sat with me when my parents' arguments echoed down the hallway. But the day everything changed, I was 12. I came home from school, my backpack still slung over one shoulder, only to find boxes stacked by the front door. Brown tape sealed them shut. My chest tightened. Mom? Dad? What's going on? I asked, my voice cracking. My father didn't even look up from the newspaper. We're cleaning out the junk, Emily. You're too old for toys. My mom added without hesitation, they're being donated. Or sold. We need the space. I remember standing there, frozen, my palms sweating. My heart pounded so loudly, I could barely hear myself protest. But they're mine. My voice broke, sharp and desperate. You can't just take them. My mother's hand sliced through the air. Don't start. You need to grow up. Focus on school, not silly things. I ran up to the attic, 2 steps at a time. Empty. Shelves stripped bare. Milo was gone. The room echoed with absence. I sank to the floor, my knees pulling tight against my chest. It felt like a part of me had been ripped away. That night, I cried so hard my throat burned. My small hands shook as I clutched the only toy I had managed to hide in my backpack, a tiny plastic horse with a chipped ear. The one that now sits on my desk today. I remember my grandmother's words, whispered into my ear the next morning when she found me curled up and red-eyed. Emily, don't let anyone decide what's important to you. If they take it away, build it back bigger, stronger. Make the world see its value. That moment branded itself into my bones. The sting of loss, the coldness of dismissal, and the tiny flicker of resolve. That was the day I silently promised myself I would never let anyone sell my dreams again. Leaving home for college felt like breaking out of a cage. I packed my life into 2 suitcases, took a bus to New York, and never looked back. At first, life was messy. Cheap apartments with peeling paint, ramen dinners, and nights when I wondered if my parents had been right all along. Maybe toys were silly. Maybe dreams were impractical. But then, during a late-night design class, I sketched something almost instinctively, a little plush rabbit. Not Milo exactly, but close enough. The professor stopped at my desk, studying the lines. That, she said, tapping her pen on the page, isn't just a doodle. That's marketable. It was the first time someone other than my grandmother had told me my imagination had value. I took part-time jobs to survive, waiting tables, folding clothes at a department store, but every spare hour went into sketching and stitching prototypes. My fingertips were raw from sewing, my eyes bleary from midnight research on toy manufacturing. The turning point came when I met Margaret Doyle, a retired toy executive who occasionally lectured at my university. She was sharp, elegant, and had this uncanny ability to see right through excuses. After class, I nervously showed her my stuffed rabbit design. She smiled. "Emily, toys aren't just for children. They're for the child still inside every adult. If you can capture that, you'll never fail." Her mentorship was brutal, but priceless. She introduced me to contacts, critiqued every detail, and reminded me again and again, don't play small because others once told you to. The road wasn't smooth. I pitched my designs to companies only to hear, too sentimental. Investors laughed at the idea of a young woman reviving plush toys in a world obsessed with gadgets. Some days, I cried in the bathroom at work after rejection emails. But the sting of my parents' dismissal, their voices telling me to grow up, was the fire that pushed me forward. Then came my first break. A boutique toy shop in Brooklyn agreed to carry 5 of my handmade plush rabbits. I remember arranging them on the shelf, my hands trembling, heart pounding. When I went back 2 weeks later, they were gone, sold out. The owner handed me a check, grinning. "Got any more, sweetheart?" That moment, it felt like oxygen flooding my lungs after years of holding my breath. From there, word spread. A small Kickstarter campaign turned into a modest online following. Parents wrote emails thanking me for creating toys that reminded them of their childhoods. Collectors asked for custom designs. Slowly, dollar by dollar, I began building something real. But I didn't tell my family. Whenever my mother called, I kept it vague. "I'm fine. School is busy." When my father asked if I had a steady job, yet I mumbled something about freelancing. I didn't want their doubts, their sighs, their backhanded comments. My success was still fragile, still tender. It was mine, and I wasn't going to let them crush it. Years later, after endless late nights, broken needles, contracts, failures, and tiny victories, my company was born. Not just a little workshop, an actual corporation with my name at the top of the letterhead. And every step of the way, I carried that chipped plastic horse in my pocket, a reminder of the promise I'd made to myself as a little girl. It happened on a Friday afternoon, the kind where the city buzzed louder than usual. I was reviewing prototypes in my office when my assistant buzzed in. "Emily, there's a couple here asking for you. They said they're your parents." For a moment, I froze. The name on her lips felt like a ghost slipping into my polished world. My parents hadn't visited me in years. Calls were rare, brief, usually filled with veiled criticism disguised as advice. I told her to let them in. The glass doors opened, and there they were, Richard and Susan Carter. My father, still stiff in his posture, though his hair had grayed. My mother, clutching her purse, as though she might bolt if things went wrong. "Emily," she said, almost uncertainly. "We thought we'd stop by. We were in the city." In the city. 32 floors below, maybe. Not here, not in my world. I motioned for them to sit on the leather chairs opposite my desk. The sunlight streaming across the skyline poured into the office, highlighting the sleek wood panels, the framed patents on the walls, and, most telling of all, the display shelf behind me, filled with plush toys. At first, they didn't notice. They were too busy glancing at the floor, the ceiling, anywhere but me. My father cleared his throat. "We heard. You're doing well. Your cousin mentioned something about toys." I leaned back, crossing my legs slowly, deliberately. Something like that. It was almost amusing, watching their eyes wander the room until realization began to dawn. On one shelf sat a row of plush rabbits, the very same design that had started it all. Next to them, action figures, miniature playsets, colorful packaging, all branded with the logo, Carter and Company. Toys. My mother finally leaned forward, squinting. These look like the toys you used to play with." I smiled, soft but sharp. "That's because they are. I recreated them. I built them into a company." Silence. My father's face stiffened as if he had misheard me. You own this company? Yes, I said evenly. I don't just work here. I founded it. I own it. Every toy you see, every distribution contract, every factory line, every storefront carrying my designs, all mine. My words hung heavy in the air, each one sinking deeper into the space between us. My mother blinked rapidly, as though trying to stitch together the girl she once scolded for being childish with the woman sitting in front of her now. But you were always so. She cut herself off. Fragile. I offered. Naive? A dreamer? Her lips pressed tight. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. For once, his voice carried none of its usual authority. I didn't realize, he stopped, then tried again. We didn't realize this was possible. I let the silence stretch, the hum of the city below filling the gap. I wanted them to feel it. The weight of years, the cost of underestimation. Finally, I stood, walking to the shelf behind me. I picked up a single plush rabbit, its stitched ears perfectly upright. Holding it gently, I turned back to them. You sold my toys because you thought they were worthless. Just junk cluttering the house. But those toys, they were my world. And now, they're the world for thousands of children across the country. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eyes watered, though she blinked it away quickly. I set the rabbit back down, my hand steady. You wanted me to grow up. I did. But not in the way you imagined. I grew up building an empire out of what you threw away. Their silence wasn't angry. It was stunned, heavy, shame woven into disbelief. And for the first time in my life, I felt no need to chase their approval. I let them sit in the silence a little longer. My mother fidgeted with the clasp of her purse. My father kept his hands folded, his knuckles white. Finally, I spoke. You know what the funny part is? I don't hate you for selling my toys. Their heads jerked up, surprised. I hated it when I was 12, yes. It broke me in ways you'll never understand. But now, I see it differently. If you hadn't taken them away, maybe I wouldn't have fought so hard to build this. Maybe I wouldn't have found my fire. My mother's voice cracked. Emily, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just thought that toys didn't matter. My tone was firm, but calm. That's always been the problem. You decided what should matter to me. You dismissed my heart because it didn't look like yours. Her eyes brimmed, but I didn't let the moment soften too quickly. This wasn't about comfort. This was about truth. I don't need your apology, I continued. What I need is change. If you want to be part of my life now, if you want to step into this world you once told me wasn't possible, there are conditions. My father straightened, defensive. Conditions? Yes. I stood tall, walking slowly to the window, the skyline stretching endlessly behind me. Condition 1. You respect my work. No sighs, no eye rolls, no subtle digs. You speak of it with the pride you denied me as a girl. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Condition 2. You stop comparing me to anyone else. I'm not my cousins, not the neighbor's kids, not the child you once wished I'd be. I'm me. And if you can't love me as I am, then there's no seat for you at my table. The words hit hard. I could see it in the way my father's lips tightened, the way his shoulders sagged. Condition 3, I said, turning back to face them. You pursue something of your own. You've spent so long telling me to grow up. But what do you have to show for your dreams? Mom, you always wanted to paint. Dad, you used to talk about writing a book. Stop tearing down others and start building yourselves. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. My father's face had softened, the fight draining out of him. My mother's tissue was balled tight in her fist. I took a breath, my voice gentler now. I'm willing to help. Financially, emotionally, even with resources. But only if you step into this new chapter as equals, not as people who once belittled me. I will not carry dead weight. I will not shrink myself again. For the first time, my father didn't argue. He just nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. My mother reached for his hand, her fingers trembling. In that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge or proving them wrong. It was about rewriting the script of our family, on my terms. The power had shifted. and I wasn't giving it back. The weeks that followed were strange. For the first time, my parents actually listened when I spoke. My mother sent me photos of her first attempts at painting, soft landscapes in pastel colors, hesitant brushstrokes that grew bolder with each canvas. My father started writing, emailing me fragments of short stories late at night, as if afraid the words might vanish by morning. It wasn't perfect. Old habits slipped through, sometimes a critical tone, a dismissive sigh, but now there was awareness. They caught themselves. They tried. And I finally stopped waiting for their approval like it was oxygen. I had already learned to breathe without it. What I found instead was a new kind of relationship, one where I wasn't begging to be seen, but choosing to be. One Saturday, my parents visited the company's headquarters again. This time, they didn't enter stiff and guarded. They walked through the design floor slowly, pausing to admire the sketches pinned on walls, the prototypes scattered on tables, the laughter of my team testing new toys. When they reached the display shelf in my office, my mother's eyes landed on the chipped plastic horse, the one toy I had hidden all those years ago. She touched it gently, her fingers lingering as though it burned with memory. "I can't believe you kept this," she whispered. "I didn't just keep it," I said softly. "It kept me." Her eyes shimmered, and for once, she had no answer. As the evening light poured through the windows, I thought about that little girl in the attic, clutching her last toy with trembling hands. She would never have believed this moment was possible. She would never have imagined that the very thing torn from her could become the foundation of everything she built. But here I was. I walked to the window, looking out at the city glowing beneath me. The hum of traffic, the pulse of dreams being chased, lost, and found again. Behind me, my parents stood quietly, smaller somehow, not because I had diminished them, but because I had finally grown into my full height. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The toys they once sold weren't gone. They had only transformed into my empire, my strength, my voice. I turned back, smiling, my voice steady, my heart unshakable. "They stole my childhood toys," I said, more to myself than to them. "But now, I own the company that makes them,